The sound of a human heart stopping is not a sound you hear with your ears. It is a vibration you feel in the soles of your feet, a sudden void where a rhythm used to be. But before the silence, there was the noise. Oh God, there was so much noise. It started with the shatter of crystal, a champagne flute hitting the polished oak floorboards of the Centennial Hall, a sharp, violent punctuation mark in the middle of a jazz standard. Then came a thud. That heavy, wet sound of dead weight, collapsing against gravity. It is a sound that haunts nightmares, because it is the sound of the soul leaving the room. I was standing by the velvet curtains, invisible as always, clutching a clutch bag I didn't know how to hold, watching the colours of the Westbridge College graduation ball swirl in a blur of satin and ambition. 1 second, Professor Richards was laughing, his hand raised in a toast, the light catching the rim of his spectacles. The next, he was a heap of tweed and terror on the parquet floor. The music didn't stop immediately. The saxophone wailed on for 3 seconds too long. Then, the scream cut through the air, high-pitched, jagged, tearing the festive atmosphere into ribbons. He's dead! Oh my God, he's dead! Time didn't just slow down, it curdled. The air left the room. 300 of the brightest young minds in New England, future CEOs, lawyers and engineers, and every single one of them froze. They became statues of fear, except me, and that is the terrifying thing about heroism. It doesn't feel like courage, it feels like drowning, and the only way to breathe is to dive deeper.
To understand why I moved when everyone else froze, you have to understand the ghosts I grew up with. My name is Lily Chen. For 4 years at Westbridge College, I was the ghost in the back row of the lecture hall. I was the girl whose name professors stumbled over during roll call, because they couldn't quite place my face. I was the safe roommate, the one who studied on Friday nights, the one who wore cardigans in July because I wanted to cover up, to shrink, to occupy as little space in the universe as possible.
I was born in Boston, in a narrow brownstone that smelled perpetually of old paper and antiseptic. My father, Dr. Chen, was a cardiothoracic surgeon at Mass General. While other fathers read their daughters Goodnight Moon or Cinderella, my barber read me Gray's Anatomy. I remember sitting on his lap when I was 6, tracing the bloom red lines of the circulatory system in a leather-bound medical encyclopedia. "Lily," he would say, his voice raspy from a 14-hour shift, his eyes heavy with the weight of life saved and lost. The heart is not just a pump, it is a drummer. It keeps the time for the entire body. If the drummer stops, the music ends. You must always listen for the rhythm. I worshipped him. I wanted to be him. I wanted to have hands that could reach into a chest and restart a life. But I didn't have his steel. I had his eyes, but I had my mother's terrifying shyness.
I crumbled under pressure. In high school debates, I stuttered. In biology labs, I shook so hard, I dropped the scalpel. So, I ran. I ran from medicine into marketing. It was safe. It was behind the scenes.
I could write copy, analyze data, and never have to hold a human life in my trembling hands. I spent my years at Westbridge hiding in the stacks of the library, avoiding the frat parties on Greek Row, avoiding the eyes of boys, avoiding the expectations of my father. I told myself I was happy. I told myself that being invisible was a superpower, because ghosts cannot be hurt. Then came the graduation ball. My roommate Sarah, a whirlwind of blonde ambition and glitter, had practically dragged me out of my dorm room.
"It's the last night, Lily. You cannot graduate without wearing a dress that costs more than your textbooks. I won't allow it." So there I was,
Standing against the wall in a navy blue dress that blended perfectly with the shadows. Hair pulled back so tight it gave me a headache, watching the golden children of Westbridge celebrate their invincibility. I felt like an imposter. I was just waiting for the clock to strike midnight, so I could turn back into a pumpkin and go home. I didn't know that midnight was about to come early.
The Centennial Hall was a cavernous, historic beast of a building. It had high vaulted ceilings that trapped the heat and the humidity of hundreds of dancing bodies. The air smelt of expensive perfume, floor wax, and the metallic tang of spiked punch. Professor Arthur Richards was holding court near the buffet table. Everyone knew Richards. He was the Dean of Anatomy, a legend who had taught at Westbridge for 40 years. He was a bear of a man, with a white beard, and a laugh that rattled the windows. He was the one professor who had actually tried to learn my name, even though I wasn't in his department. He always smiled at me in the cafeteria. He looked flushed tonight, too flushed. I was watching him from my safe distance, analysing the scene like a marketer. Target demographic, affluent academics. Mood, celebratory. He was telling a story, gesturing wildly with a glass of sparkling "I'm good to see you for this time." A group of students surrounded him, laughing at his punchline. Then, I saw it. It was a subtle shift, something most people wouldn't notice. His left hand went to his chest, fingers clutching the lapel of his tweed jacket. His laugh cut short, transforming into a confused wheeze. The colour didn't just drain from his face, it plummeted. He turned ash-grey in the span of a heartbeat. His eyes, usually twinkling with wit, went wide and vacant. He looked surprised. That's what stuck with me later, the surprise, as if he couldn't believe his own biology was betraying him. He took one step back, his heel catching on the edge of the rug. The glass fell, shatter, the knees buckled, thud. The crowd didn't react instantly. There is a psychological phenomenon where the brain refuses to accept a disaster. For a split second, people thought it was a joke. Maybe he had had too much to drink. Maybe he was acting out a scene. Then, the twitching started. A seizure-like stiffness seized his limbs. A girl in a red sequin dress screamed. The bubble burst. The music died, strangled by the DJ who finally realized something was wrong. I stood frozen against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't marketing. This wasn't a textbook. This was a man dying 10 feet away from the chocolate fountain. Chaos is not loud. Chaos is discordant. "Call 911, someone shrieked. "Give him air! Back up! Is there a doctor? Is anyone pre-med?" The circle around Professor Richards widened, ironically giving him too much space. No one wanted to touch him. It was the bystander effect in its purest, deadliest form. Everyone assumed someone else would know what to do. They were pulling out their phones, not to call for help, but to record, to stream the tragedy. The blue light of screens illuminated the fallen man's face. I saw the football captain, a guy who could bench press a Buick, standing there with his hands over his mouth, crying. I saw the class president frantically typing on her phone, her fingers slipping on the screen. Professor Richards was gasping, agonal breathing. It sounds like snoring, like a fish flopping on a deck. "It's the sound of the brainstem fighting a losing battle. Don't move," my brain whispered. "You are a marketing major. You are the ghost. Stay in the shadows. You will only make it worse. You will mess it up and everyone will blame you." My feet felt leaden. The distance between the wall and the professor felt like miles. But then I saw his eyes. They were rolling back, fixing on the ceiling, seeing nothing. And in that grey, slack face, I saw my father. I saw the man who came home exhausted to teach me about the ventricles and the atria. "Time is muscle, Lily." My father's voice echoed in my head, clear as a bell. "Every second the brain goes without oxygen, you lose a piece of the person." 4 minutes. You have 4 minutes before he is gone forever. How much time had passed? 30 seconds. A minute. I looked at the crowd. They were paralyzed by the enormity of the moment. If I didn't move, Professor Richards would lie on this floor, surrounded by students filming his last breath. The fear was a cold bucket of water, but the anger at the inaction, anger at the phones, anger at my own cowardice, was hot. It burned through the paralysis. I dropped my clutch bag. It hit the floor with a soft thump that nobody heard. I quished off the wall. I didn't run. I sprinted. I shoved past a guy in a tuxedo who was yelling for security. "Move!" I didn't recognize my own voice. It was guttural, low and fierce. I slid onto my knees beside the professor, ignoring the sting of the hardwood against my skin, ignoring the expensive fabric of my dress tearing. "Professor Richards," I shouted, slapping his shoulders hard. No response. He was dead weight. I leaned down, placing my ear to his mouth, my hand on his carotid artery. The skin was clammy, cold sweat already forming. Look, listen, feel. No breath, no pulse, nothing. Just the terrifying hollow silence where a life should be. "He's in cardiac arrest." I screamed at the crowd. I pointed a shaking finger at the class president. "You, call 911 and tell them we have a code blue. Do not hang up." I pointed at the football captain. "You, go to the lobby and get the AED. Run!" They moved. My voice had broken the spell. I turned back to the professor. My hands were trembling violently. "Stop it," I commanded myself. "Be Baba. Be the surgeon." I interlaced my fingers, placing the heel of my hand on the center of his sternum, right on the nipple line. I locked my elbows. I leaned my body weight forward, and I pushed. Crack. The sound of his ribs fracturing was sickening. A collective gasp went through the crowd. It felt like snapping dry twigs wrapped in wet leather. I almost vomited. "Don't stop," my father's voice whispered. "You are the comp now. You are the engine. I began the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. Staying alive. That was the tempo. 100 to 120 beats per minute. Ah, ha, ha! Staying alive. Staying alive. Come on. Come on. I gritted out through clenched teeth. Pump hard. Pump fast. Allow full recoil. My triceps burned. The sweat dripped from my forehead onto my nose. My neatly pinned hair unraveled, falling into my eyes, but I couldn't brush it away. The world narrowed down to the 2 square inches of his chest. The crowd disappeared. The music disappeared. There was only the resistance of his thorax and the desperate need to force oxygenated blood into his brain. 1 minute passed. It felt like an hour. Where is the damn ambulance? I yelled, never breaking rhythm. My arms were screaming. CPR is exhausting. It drains you physically and emotionally. I watched his face, still grey, still dead. Am I doing this right? Am I just desecrating a corpse? Doubt crept in, cold and slimy. No, keep going. So suddenly, the football captain slid next to me. Breathless, holding the defibrillator case. I got it. Open it. Put the pads on. I ordered, not stopping compressions. He fumbled. I kept pumping. And 1, and 2, and 3. He slapped the pads on the bare chest. The machine hummed to life. A robotic voice cut through the silence, analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. I threw my hands up and backed away, hovering. The silence in the hall was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Shock advised. Charging. The high-pitched whine of the capacitor filled the room. Press the orange button now. The captain froze. Push it. I screamed. He pressed it. Professor Richard's body jolted, his back arching off the floor as the electricity seized his muscles. He slammed back down. Begin CPR. I dove back in immediately. No hesitation. My hands found the spot. Pump, hump, come back. I whispered, tears finally stinging my eyes. Please, Professor, don't you dare die on graduation day. Please. And then, 30 seconds later, under my hands, I felt it. A resistance, a shudder. He gasped. A jagged, terrible, wonderful cough that sprayed pink foam. His eyelids fluttered. I stopped. I grabbed his wrist. Thump up, dump, dump. It was weak. It was thready. But it was there. The drummer was back. He has a pulse. I cried out. The sound that erupted from the room wasn't a cheer. It was a primal release of tension. Professor Richard's eyes opened. They were unfocused, swimming in confusion, but they found my fists. He looked at me, really looked at me, the invisible girl. Easy, I soothed, stroking his forehead, my hands slick with his sweat and my own. You're okay. You're at Westbridge. The ambulance is coming. Just breathe. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder, music to my ears. The paramedics swept in like a storm of neon yellow and professionalism. They took over, intubating, lifting, moving. I was pushed back, suddenly just a girl in a ruined dress again. As they wheeled the surreal aftermath of the event, Professor Richards lifted a weak hand. The paramedics paused. He looked for me in the crowd. When he saw me, he didn't speak. He couldn't. But he nodded. A tiny, imperceptible nod. Then he was gone. I sat on the floor in the empty circle, my knees bruised, my hands trembling uncontrollably, now that the adrenaline was crashing. The silence broke. Lily. It was Sarah. She looked at me like I was an alien. Did you just save his life? Suddenly, I was mobbed. People were crying, hugging me, patting my back. The dean of the college was there, looking pale and shaking my hand with both of his. The football captain looked at me with total awe. I didn't know you knew how to do that, someone said. I didn't know you were like that, another said. I looked down at my hands. They were red and sore. They didn't look like the hands of a marketing major. They looked like my father's hands. The next morning, the Westbridge Gazette headline screamed in bold font, "The pulse of a campus. Quiet heroine saves legend."
There was a picture of me, taken by someone's phone, kneeling over the professor, hair wild, face fierce with determination. I didn't recognize the girl in the photo. She looked powerful. My phone blew up. My parents called from Boston.
My father didn't say much. He just listened to the story. And then, in a voice thick with emotion, he said, "You listened, Lily. You heard the rhythm. That was worth more than any diploma." Professor Richard survived.
He underwent a triple bypass and was back teaching the next semester. that things were different for me. I couldn't walk across campus without someone stopping me. The shadows were gone.
I had stepped into the light, and I found that it didn't burn me.
2 weeks later, at the actual graduation ceremony, the valedictorian got the flu. The dean called me. He didn't ask, he insisted. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of mortarboards and gowns, I felt the old fear prickle. But then, I touched my own wrist. I felt my own pulse, steady, strong, a drum beat. I leaned into the microphone. I spent 4 years at Westbridge trying to be invisible, I told them. My voice didn't shake. I thought that if I stayed quiet, if I stayed in the background, I would be safe. I thought that heroism was for other people, loud people, strong people. I paused. The audience was dead silent, but biology teaches us something else. The heart sits in a cage of bone, hidden in the dark, never seeing the sun. Yet, it works harder than any other part of us. It doesn't need an audience to do its job. It just beats. I looked at the empty chair where Professor Richards would have sat, and then at my father in the front row, wiping his eyes. I learned that night that knowledge is potential energy. But action is kinetic. It doesn't matter what you know if you don't have the courage to use it when the music stops. We are all told to follow our hearts. I'm telling you to listen to them. Listen to your own, and listen to the hearts of the people around you. Because sometimes you are the only thing standing between a beat and the silence. I toss my cap in the air. I am not a marketing executive today. I am a first-year resident in emergency medicine at Mass General. My hair is still messy, my days are long, and I am often exhausted. But I am no longer invisible. I am the girl who listened, and I will never stop listening for the rhythm. It is 3 a.m. The dorm room is quiet, save for the rhythmic breathing of Sarah, who is sleeping off the adrenaline and the champagne. But I am awake. I am staring at my hands. They are just hands. Small, with short nail beds and a callus on the middle finger from years of gripping a pen too tightly. They are the hands of a girl who writes marketing copy, who folds laundry, who turns pages in library books so quietly that not even the librarian hears. Yet, 4 hours ago, these hands reached into the chest of a dying man and forced his heart to beat. They acted when my brain was screaming at me to freeze. And now, in the silence, I am forced to ask myself, and you, a question that terrifies me more than the sight of a flatline. What is the cost of being safe? For 22 years, I have treated my life like a delicate specimen in a glass jar. I kept the lid screwed on tight. I controlled the environment. I regulated the temperature. I avoided contamination. I told myself that this was wisdom.
I told myself that by staying in the shadows, by not raising my hand, by not wearing the bright dress, by not pursuing the terrifying career of a surgeon, I was protecting myself.
But tonight, as I washed the smell of the floor wax and another man's sweat off my skin, I realized that the glass jar isn't protection. It is a coffin. Think about it. How many times have you stood on the edge of a room, watching life happen to other people? How many times have you had the answer in your head, but kept your mouth shut because you were afraid of being wrong?
How many times have you swallowed your own voice until it tasted like ash? We tell ourselves we are being humble. We tell ourselves we are being realistic. But let's be honest, shall we? It is not humility.
It is cowardice dressed up in sensible shoes. We are hoarding our potential because we are terrified of the expenditure. We treat our energy, our talent, and our courage like a limited resource that must be rationed.
But the heart teaches us a different lesson. My father used to tell me that the heart is the only organ that takes its own blood supply first. Through the coronary arteries, it feeds itself before it feeds the rest of the body. It does this not because it is selfish, but because it cannot serve if it is starving. I have been starving myself. I have been starving my true nature to feed a persona of the quiet girl, the good immigrant daughter, the safe choice. And tonight, I saw the result of that starvation. If I had stayed in that corner, if I had let my fear of being seen outweigh my knowledge of anatomy, Arthur Richards would be a corpse. He would be cooling in a morgue right now. And I would be alive. I would be safe. I would be unmarked. But I would be hollowed out by the what if. There is a medical concept called ischemia, a restriction in blood supply to tissues, causing a shortage of oxygen that is needed for cellular metabolism.
When you restrict your true self, When you cut off the flow of who you actually are to fit into a mold of who you think you should be, you are causing spiritual ischemia. You are slowly killing the parts of you that matter. The tissue dies.
The dreams necrose, and eventually, you become a walking ghost. I look at the ceiling, and I wonder, why are we so afraid of the pulse? The pulse is proof of chaos. It is a violent, rhythmic explosion that happens 60 to 100 times a minute. To be alive is to be in a constant state of controlled explosion. To step out of the shadows is to invite that chaos in. Tonight, when I knelt on that floor, I was stripped naked. Not physically, but existentially. There was no marketing strategy. There was no brand identity. There was no Lily Chen, the shy girl. There was only biology. There was only the mechanics of survival. In that moment, I wasn't worried about whether my hair was messy or if people were judging me. I wasn't worried about failing. I was only concerned with the immediate, brutal necessity of action. And here is the shocking truth I need you to understand. The fear did not go away. I was terrified. My hands were shaking so hard, I thought I would bruise him. I was afraid I would break his ribs, and I did. I was afraid he would die under my palms, and his death would be on me. But I acted with the fear. I invited the fear in, and I used it as fuel. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the realization that something else is more important than fear. I want you to look at your own life right now. Yes, you, reading this. Where are you hiding? What is your version of the library stack? Is it a job you hate but are good at? Is it a relationship where you make yourself small so the other person can feel big? Is it a silence you keep when you know you should speak? You might think you are doing everyone a favor by staying out of the way. You might think, who am I to step forward? Who am I to save the day? But who are you not to? If I had stayed against that war, the world would have lost a brilliant teacher. His grandchildren would have lost their grandfather. His students would have lost their mentor. My inaction would have had a body count. Your inaction has a cost too. It might not be a life or death medical emergency, but it is a cost. When you hide your talent, the world loses art. When you hide your love, the world becomes colder. When you hide your intelligence, problems go unsolved. When you hide your true self, you rob the rest of us of the person you were meant to be. I used to think that the main character energy was arrogant. I thought it was for the loud, the blonde, the wealthy, the charismatic. I thought I was destined to be the NPC, the non-player character, the background texture. But tonight I learned that we are all the protagonists of our own existence. Whether we accept the role or not, the plot is happening to you. The conflict is coming for you. You can either let it roll over you, or you can engage with it. And yes, it is dangerous. When you stand up, you become a target. When you speak out, you can be criticized. When you try to save someone, you might fail. The professor could have died. I could have done everything right, and he still could have died. And then everyone would have stared at me, the girl who tried and failed. The shame would have been excruciating. But would it have been worse than the regret of doing nothing? I don't think so. My father was right. You have to listen to the heart, but not just the physical thumping in the chest. You have to listen to the metaphorical heart that screams at you when you are living a lie. That tightness in your chest when you walk into a job you hate, that's your heart going into arrest. That panic you feel when you want to speak but don't, that's your soul struggling to breathe. I am done with the marketing degree. I know that now. It's a perfectly fine degree for someone else, but for me, it is a mask. I am going to apply to medical school. I am going to be terrified every single day. I am going to study until my eyes burn. I am going to hold lives in my hands, and I am going to lose some of them. I will cry in utility closets. I will doubt myself. But I will never again stand against the wall while someone falls. I want you to take a breath. Feel it? That expansion of your lungs? That is a gift. That is opportunity. Do not waste it being invisible. Break the glass jar. Step on the glass. Let it bleed if it has to. Because the alternative, the safe, quiet, invisible life, is not a life at all. It's just a long, slow waiting room for the end. The ambulance has left. The party is over. The dawn is coming. It's time to check your pulse. Is it beating? Good. Then do something with it.